In a world where space and time are intertwined, one man dared to challenge the status quo. His name? Dayton Miller. His weapon of choice? A flute. But not just any flute. This instrument held the power to unleash the ether, a pervasive medium once thought to fill the universe. Miller, a physicist by trade.
All right, hello and welcome everyone to a Man of Stone update on the Marinov motor, and I believe there is a second update for something else as well. So there's going to be a twofer, the old back-to-back as they call it. So Stone, whenever you're ready, walk us through the Marinov situation and what you have planned tonight.
All right. Howdy, hey gang. Thanks for showing up, everybody. This is fabulous to see a nice fat audience here. Plus everybody in YouTube land. Howdy, hey. And I'm just sharing the screen and the audio right about now. Yeah. So I'm not going to say too much up front. I just want to hit you with the punchline. For those not paying attention, since the first week of October, when we reviewed a paper on a particular motor style done by Marinov, there were some people in the audience there who wanted to see a real prototype of it, and points to Plenum 88 for putting effort into trying to replicate what Marinov did on paper. But there were some things that he kind of departed from the plan a little bit here and there, physically speaking. So I figured, okay, well, that's what I've been doing for the last 20 odd years. Why wouldn't I do it with this technology too? It looks fairly simple to replicate. So that's when I got into the 3D world, a couple of weeks worth to put together how I would go about replicating what Marinov is asserting and overcoming some of the physical challenges that Plenum 88 came up against when he went down his path. So I have compiled a couple, like half a dozen short pieces of video over the last week and a half of how things have been going in the lab while sliding into home plate. My magnets finally arrived in like the third week of December, which were actually a custom order. I had the guy make them because I couldn't find them on any magnet.com site out there. Nobody seemed to have a 4-inch long by half-inch wide by quarter-inch thick neodymium that's been magnetized through its length. Just for convenience sake, it's easier for them to place them into their machines flat and polarize them through their face. So nobody had one that was 4 inches long. So I had this guy do up a custom order, which I thought was really awesome. They're in Colorado. I'll see if I can dig their name up by the end. But if not, by all means, people just get a hold of me if you'd like to know how to get a hold of those guys. And without much further ado, let's just work the list of things I've got going on here. This is my cute little title page. This is a frame from a 3D render that I did, which was an animation of everything going by here. And I might as well just show that to you right here. I have it right there for a quick look around for everybody who wants to see what I was building. This is the rotor in pink, which is the magnets going through the middle there. And everything around the outside has to do with the wiring and how to put that on the outside of the machine so that you don't have to use brushed commutation to run the current through this machine. And I think using a horizontal axis like this is also just a more convenient, far easier way to build this thing and really take the friction knowingly right to the ground in a really straight up way. What am I going to show you right after that? Not to worry, I'm sure I'll remember what the hell I'm doing by the time we get into the top. So, without further ado, this is me on the 29th of December, just getting in with the original design, trying to make it happen. Here we go. All right, gang. it's not looking good for Marinov. That's all I can say. I have put together 10 lengths of 7 inductor, 7 filament Litz wire. What you see here are both of those wires going in. Occurred to me that you can't hear a thing that I'm saying.
Yeah, I was just about to ask.
Yeah, so what I wanted to do was stop you at this point right here and show you the 2D representation of what's going on with that wiring. That the wiring, the current comes in here around the middle, close to where the rotor is, outside, and then back in close to where the rotor is, so that we have the current going from right to left in both cases around the rotor. And that's why I showed you the other picture of Marinov, where that's actually what he represents with this physical around ring. The middle, close to where the rotor one way and the current going around the other way. What I've done is I've created extra paths around the outside, around this way, to complete the circuit without it being part of what's interfering with the magnet. I gave it a fair bit of space in between. And so that's just to clarify those who are really interested in where the electrons are going. So let's get back to what we're doing here. Around the center, and then out. One goes down, one goes up, around the outside, and back to complete the loop. You have hemispheres matching, and this is so many welds. So 70 welds there, and another 70 on the backside to turn this all into one 70-turn Marinov motor, where the conduits in the middle here are fairly close to the middle. But the glue job wasn't the greatest. It's just a prototype, so they're just so slightly off center. And I think that is the reason why I'm getting any torque at all out of this thing, even at 29 watts. The total resistance through these, well, what is that going to come to? 140 conductors end to end is 16 or 17 ohms, which isn't too bad. That allows for a fair bit of power when you use something like 22.3 volts. I've connected a momentary switch right here. So when he's on, you get 1.35 coming out of it. And when it heats up, that drops to 1.30. And when you let her go, she goes to 0. You turn her on, she goes up. You let her go, she goes to 0. It's a pretty square wave. But the question is, how much torque do we get out of it when we push the button? Let me demonstrate first that how little resistance there is here. That yes, it's a little bit out of balance, but that's only, a 40 millimeter. I forget what what it is. I got it in my next diagram for you right here. It is actually 82 millimeters in diameter from this side of the rotor to the other. The pinks are the magnets themselves going through. And take you back to the video right about there. Diameter of that thing is, it's not even the length of my index finger in terms of diameter. And it's still wobbling, trying to find center. Just then it stopped. I mean, the friction on this thing is pretty low. I'll just take you briefly over to the pre-production folder, is because of these teeny little bearings. That's a 5 millimeter outside diameter bearing, 2 millimeter inside. This is a regular old Joe Blow toothpick that just almost fits all the way through this little tiny hole, just to give you a grip on how ultimately small these bearings are. And that is telling you how low the friction is. Right in that path of travel. It's pretty near 0. There's just a hair of friction there. You'll notice it's not totally out of balance. It doesn't sit like this. It sits like that. Just ever so slightly out. Nearly zero friction. And you can see that I've made the wall here on the inside 3 millimeters, which was probably pretty good. What I should have done to rigidify it more is add wall on the edge of it more to connect all the way through. These are flexible in terms of the torque you can put on them. So I've actually had to glue the 6 o'clock positions square to take the distortioning force of this wire, which isn't quite conforming to it, and keeping it from misshaping it. So I'm gluing one of the contacts down here, one of the spacers, most of which are just sitting there freely, just to bring it back into circular so that we're not allowing any friction here. All right, so what does it look like? Here we are turning it on and off, and you can see with the switch, that's all I'm doing. On and off at 22.3 volts. Okay, so here we are at the rest position, and fortunately that's just after the 9 o'clock position, if you view on this part of the magnet, I guess. And here we go with on, off, on, off. I mean, that's how little torque that I'm getting, even when I'm using its own inertia to swing it. And that is all the torque that I'm getting out of this thing. At 29 watts worth of power going through. That's the best that I can manage. And I think the reason that I'm getting any at all is because of what I mentioned in the beginning. That this set of wires coming across isn't quite in the center like the outer ones are. It's close. Now, I know you're looking at it upside down right now, but I'm just trying to give you an idea about clearance from one side versus the other side. That it's pretty close to the middle, but not quite. So when you're looking at it this way in terms of where's the magnet sitting, here it is right there, you can see that the magnet, and that's the benefit of using something like SolidWorks to put your model together, you know that those wires, the center of the stator, so to speak, the center of the stator here, is at the center of the magnets precisely, to the millimeter. So when we're looking at the offset here, we're only talking about a couple of millimeters away from the block lines of the magnets themselves. That we're really near the center. The point is that we're not exactly at the center here, and I think that's why we're getting any torque at all. That if this was exactly centered on the magnet's block line between north and south, we wouldn't be getting any torque at all, regardless of when we turn it on or what its orientation is or whether it's polarized one way or the other through the conductor. I don't think that's going to be relevant at all. And this is, for me, this is confirmation of what my subconscious was telling me the moment I laid eyes on this technology. I mean, props to Plenum 88 for spending some time to try and replicate what he was seeing in the paper, but he departed from it when he used his set of magnets as the stator. But the point is that they are a collection of radially cut magnets, and they're all pole to pole to pole to pole to pole. So we might as well take a look at those. I just pulled the picture for that for you guys as well. That is right here. So that's what Plenum 88 was doing. You can see that these are all wedge cut, and this is north to south to north to south to north to south. So it's really not the same model, but it's a pretty good try. That's what I can say about that. Pole to pole to pole to pole. So I think that he was getting something entirely different in the relationship between his wire and his magnet array, because it wasn't anything like this geometry, which is the one that Marinov proposes in his papers and shows in his modeling. So, again, what we're doing here is we are confirming exactly what 20 years of my experience And my subconscious was just screaming at me the whole time, going, why are you applying electrical lines of force to the block line of the magnet? Everything we've ever done in terms of technology to drive with DC power or pulse DC, that's my shop kitty there. Don't mind her. That's Ivy. Everything that I've ever built has been application of pole face to pole face. It's a conflict between polarities, which is where all the action takes place. That rant, and we'll move our way to the next piece of the video. I think I'll show you guys what I was up to for the months that I was waiting for these magnets to arrive. This is the circuitry for switching. I have a nice pretty one for you guys to look at there. That's our schematic. 12 volt supply from the other side, which you're going to see in a minute when I do the rewiring in favoring amps instead of volts like we were seeing. This is just a resistor split where we're taking 4 volts off into the reg, into switching, and then we explain this particular discrete component in a sec in the video. This would be the coils, the wires we are looking at in the stator, and there would be 2 MOSFETs controlling the movement of positive through them to negative. And on the entire right side here, this instead of a regular lamp, I actually did use 2 LEDs, which I'll show you. On the outside of a little box, you can see the pot and the switch. On the inside, at one point, you can see the cap, and then there's a big fat diode hanging off the edge of the box with its own separate heatsink, just for good measure. Not that it was ever going to need one, because the only thing that hits it would have been a collapsing spike off of the coil. And those are always coming in cool and never heat up these puppies anyways. But we threw it on just for, I guess, looks, but just to, I don't know, make absolutely foolproof the plan if I was ever going to get as far as using this switching, which I didn't. And you're going to see more about why forthwith. Here we go. That I had developed where this puppy right here is actually its own infrared light source triggering its own optical sensor, which is completely frictionless and was going to take place on this post here, just this side of the cylinder. There was going to be a paper coming out the same inline axis point as where we're measuring here at the post, where the sensor would be, and where there is paper, it would be switched off. Where there's no paper, it would be switched on, that kind of thing. And we had actually completed all of the circuitry for that. It's all put together and ready to go. The sensor is actually right here. Little teeny guy, he's cute. That's what he looks like. That's the light on the right and the IR sensor covered on the left. I had to say that. You just drop it on the post and, where light reflects, the switch goes. The circuitry up top here was for harvesting all the back EMF they claimed that we were going to be getting off this machine, which is irrelevant if we can't even make it spin inside. That's what the optical sensor is connected to. Here, I'll throw a little light on that for you. A little power control, a little switching control. This is just power coming in off the coils, etc. This is a regulator, which is handling what is going to and from the switch. That little teeny LED only requires a little bit of power. And then we're taking the larger wires down here to the 2 MOSFETs, which you saw on either side of the coil, and rocking and rolling from there. And some sensitivity to it. You can see there's another pot along with the switch on the outside that you'll also see, just to do it that way for fun as well, for anybody watching this orientation, so that we could actually control the sensitivity of that switch as well. Oh well, that's what we do in the name of science. Moving right along. All right, so in the interest of flipping the energy equation around, I've taken all of these 140 welds in series and we've reduced them to, what is that going to be, 1/7 of that length, because we're taking each wire and we're running them 7 filament parallel now through each wire as if it's a solid conduit. So there's a total of 10 turns going past this magnet set now. And because my little power supply just doesn't quite deliver at that kind of wattage, we're using a car battery. Not really charged, but you can see it's sitting there at 12 volts. When I pulse it, it comes down to 10. This is measuring amps with a 40 amp limit. I've beefed up the switch with heavier gauge wire, so there's no resistance left in the circuit, but for these, I guess, no, that's it. There's a nice thick wire going in here to measure the current as well, so there is no log jam in terms of current coming through. And even when I do this, so you're going to see it jump, watch voltage down to 10 and amperage up to 25, 26 amps, on, off, on, off. That is still just enough with the weight itself to just get it to turn over. Just to there. I can just get it to turn over against its own out of balance weight at, what is this, 250, 260 watts. I can just get it to turn over. So, and while I'm doing this, these filaments are rightly hot at 250, 260 watts. Once again, here are the figures from 12 coming down to 10. 230, 240 watts when the wire's hot, the resistance is going up. That's a ludicrous amount of power to get such a little bit of torque out of this low resistance coming through. So I'm going to now do one last thing before I give this thing its last rites. I'm going to take these and switch them over here reversed, so that instead of the power going in and splitting around and going this way like that, we're going to have it coming in this way and around, and then around the outside, and then back in this way. So it's going to be in, out, all the way around, and then in and out, to see if that has any bearing on whether or not we're actually delivering balanced forces here instead of offset forces like we should when we're trying to invoke spin. So far, we're up to 250 watts and still getting diddly squat for torque out of this thing. No, we don't need to go to the Microsoft store. What is this crap? Get out of here. Okay. Kill that, kill that, kill that. And I don't know why you're still booting that, guys. Let's move on to the next file. Okay, here we are next day after all the rewiring. You can see the two big clips here come down to the unit. There's one there and one over there, the positive in the front, the negative in the back. That's why you see the red here and the black way over there. Those are two little thin wires that come over to the voltmeter, just to keep it clear. And then going in the coil set here, coming out of the coil set here, we're going through the loop and then back down to the same negative on the far side there. So inside, what's going on is we're going in to the inside and up and out, and then those are being connected to the bottom sides. So we're coming out and still out, and then we're coming back through the inside to here and reconnecting to the rest of them. So we have a series again of 10 turns where it's going this way and then this way, back the other way. And the battery is still almost at 12 volts. It still cuts down to almost 10. And here's the volt. So there's the voltmeter. It's showing just under 12 now. And the ammeter here at a 40 amp range. And there's our big old heavy duty switch down here. So you turn it on, we get 27 because it's somewhere between 0.3 and 0.4 ohms through the entire machine. So that's on, off, So even the unbalanced forces are not yielding anything. So much for that option. Just a suspicion. It's the things we do in the name of science, just to exhaust all of the possibilities. One or two more to go. Yes, let's start with this here. This is sort of a closeout of what we were doing this week. So to wrap it up, all I can say is I'm about 200 hours into this replication, and I don't know, a few $100 here and there. That's just life in the lab. That's what things cost. But as far as I'm concerned, the Marinov geometry is a null prospect, even at 29 watts and 50 watts for that matter. That is exactly what I was saying when I reviewed the Phipps paper, that as soon as he changed his measurement of torque into units of dyne centimeters, and I pointed it out at the time, that's what's telling me that we're getting nothing out of this in terms of using torque, and we're spending tons of watts to try and get it. I wanted to cover. I mentioned earlier in the earlier parts of the video that I was using 25, 26 amps, and with as soon as I bring this down here, there's the first one. But what's important with this comment is here, where he says that his power supply was using 20 amps instead of the 25, 26, 27 that I was using. So getting back to what we're talking about, what is a dyne centimeter? This is the conversion right here. Strangely enough, Phipps words this invertedly, that converting to foot-pounds, you would multiply it by 10 to the positive eighth. That a dyne centimeter is 73 billionths of a foot-pound. And what was he netting in his experiments? Per side for his torque, he was netting 105 dyne centimeters per amp, as in 210 dyne centimeters for the 20 amps that he was doing, maybe getting 4,000 dyne centimeters out of this thing. But the conversion here at 4,000 is still 4 millionths of a foot-pound when he was using, or claims to be using, 20 amps. So that's something I was reading, but I guess not fully realizing in the practical sense what he was trying to say when in the paper, when he was talking about the results that he was getting. So yeah, if anybody can think of a use for a 4-inch long by 1/2 inch wide by a 1/4 inch thick neodymium magnet polarized along its length, so the block line is in the middle of its length, let me know, because I have 5 pairs of these puppies now. I only ordered, I think, 6 magnets to make the guy, feel better about how much time of his I was wasting in creating a custom order for these magnets. And I guess he was digging what I was doing enough that he actually sent me 10. And I bet it was nothing to them. I bet they've got a vat of these. They've probably made a few hundred so that they could sell them to other people who come along. So yeah, guys, you can figure out a use for those. Let me know. I'd be all happy about that I didn't waste so much money doing what we're doing here in the name of science. So yeah, till next time, gang. There you have it for Marinov. So I guess as a parting stat, one thing I'd like to lay on you guys is what I was doing, as you can see by the date of this file, late 2001, some 23, 4 years ago. We're talking about a 9-volt wart, like you plug it into the wall, 220 or 110 hits the wart, and then 9-volt DC comes out of it. And that is the power that I was using to make this thing spin right here. That is a pair of CDs that are spaced by I guess 7/8 of an inch diameter by 3/16 of an inch thick neodymium discs. And there are 4 on the disc spinning around facing the coils, which are nothing more than rounded head 1/4 inch bolts with about, I don't know, maybe 200 winds of really thin wire going through in series back to this little transistor, also going through this little resistor. And this is the one that I mentioned long ago on Flat Earth Fridays, that while we were powering this with 9 volts DC, this little resistor, in line with the wires making this thing go, would actually get colder than ambient. And it's the same thing that I showed my buddy in Vancouver, who replicated this on his own bench with his own parts, and I think I just wound his coils for him. At the 6 o'clock position, this is a Hall effect sensor. It is essentially a digital 0-1 on-y-off-y kind of switch that is governed by the presence of a magnetic field. And as they're swinging by, that's how you know when to turn these guys on and off. That's all that's going on. This is your main power switch, and there's very little else going on this board. The point is that we have 9 volts in DC, and we're using a total of about 4¼ amps here, and this sucker is spinning at 1744 RPM. And it's doing it in style. It's nicely balanced. This big magnet on top is just a sort of a counterweight to cut down the jagginess of the push that we were getting out of the coils, because half of the torque production happens when the coils are actually turned off and the magnets are being attracted to the bolts around which the coils are wound. I actually, just so everybody could hear what that motor actually sounds like, I'll just turn that up for you. It sounds like this. Electrically speaking. That it's going like a bat out of hell, and we're using 4¼ watts. So when I relate my experience from 2001, for example, to how we were doing, I'm just at a loss for why Phipps, for example, was speaking in such grandiose terms for what he thinks Marinov was accomplishing here, and even what he was accomplishing on the bench with this 210 dyne centimeters per amp kind of stat, which amounts to absolutely nothing when we're talking about usable torque. They're calling this a motor. We assume that we want to get torque out of our motor to do some work, and it's nothing of the sort. And this is what a letdown. That's that's all I could say when it comes to that. So this is the end of round 1. So the first half, I guess. So I'll pause for a sec, see if we got any comments or questions up to this point. You guys can hear me still out there?
Hola, senor. Hola, senor.
Oh, good. Okay.
Dude, so I can't believe that, man. Thank you so much for going through that and taking the time to verify that. Like Stone was saying, this was like the project got extended by a couple of months because of the magnet situation. So we were all anxiously awaiting, to see what would happen with this. Sucks it didn't go the way we thought it would, man. But thank you for putting it to bed. Because now we don't have to. Now somebody will have to, outdo your work to provide anything meaningful for it.
Yes, it is my absolute pleasure. I mean, I figure I'm the right guy for the job out of this crowd to be doing such a thing, with enough practical experience in the background to see which would be the best way to go about it. And I happen to have nearly all of the parts on my hands right here in the lab. So, hooking up optical switching or something like that, for me, is just pulling things out of bins and lining them up on a perf board. For you guys, you'd have to spend hours dealing with DigiKey and Mouser and all the rest of them out there. So, any other questions from the rest of the gang? Comments, findings? All right. Well, I guess that takes us to part two. We're going to be dealing with the data. The one thing that I claim is all that is important, the only thing that is important in the flat Earth community progress, the effort, the cause, the reason we're doing this. The only thing that is important is the data. And I stress that just about everywhere I go. And here I am doing it again. And tonight will be justification for stressing that. I took McKeegan's 1353 solar filtered shots of the sun, and yeah, we bashed them up and slapped them around a little bit, and we graphed them, and we got a little bit graphic about it. So I've packed it all into something that hit the 3 minute mark. I mean, 2 weeks ago we were talking about 9 minutes with my man Jeff Healy with what came out last, but this time I guess that's just all that needed to be looked at, all that needed to be said. So it came to all of 3 minutes. Lots easier to edit the audio. And as far as the audio goes on this one, hey, if it's not your cup of tea, turn the volume down a little bit and it'll be the same. With the exception of roughly a minute or something into this vid, you're going to want to hear what McKeegan himself has to say about the data he collected. So let me just jump over and get that up for you. He lives here. All right, guys. Enjoy. That's how we go. So, how did that one grip y'all?
Where's that file, Stone?
I think I put people to sleep. Where's that file? All you gotta do is head over to McKeegan's YouTube and check his 20-minute video, and right in the description box, he posts the Google files, the links to get them, both RAW and JPEG. Geez, I put everybody to sleep with credit to the band. That's Living Color. Bunch of boys, bunch of badasses out of New York.
I knew that was the Cult of Personality band.
Yep, the same. They're called Living Color.
I've never listened to any of their other songs for some reason, but they kick ass.
You should. They got about a half a dozen albums, and I grew up with those guys. They are just hot players. But back to the story. I think we'll run it again, and I might run just a moment or two here and there of some commentary and frame some things you might want to take a closer look at as we're blasting by, because that's the way I like to keep things in my quick couple of thoughts format. Is just here it is. Use the pause key. Let's not waste anybody's time. Who doesn't want to waste time? You know, if there's some big formula to look at, then you just hit the pause key, and we're keeping all the data streams nice and short. But yeah, let's get back to this here. It. And when you're looking at this, I'm hoping everybody can recognize that just about everything that's going on here is straight across. I mean, when you look in the top right, this one appears to be going a little bit to the down left, but then so does this one, also down left, but not so much down to the left. And the rest of these are all straight across, regardless of, quote, latitude, which I think is a misnomer, because, you know, I mean, really, if this is it swinging in and then down, but the same thing over here swinging in and then down, that is not what we should see if we're 93 million miles away. We're not right here in the foreground. We're way the back out of the page, and all of these should look straight, exactly as I diagram next. This is the whole frame and nothing but the frame. This is an example of all 1,353, except for, remember, he was talking about all the problems he had, which we will be visiting in a second, the video, where he left it long enough without checking it that the sun would actually completely leave the frame, absolutely botching some of what he was recording. Fortunately, he was able to bring it back without changing the orientation much or like at all, so that essentially this line horizontal is consistent throughout his sample set. I think we are rather fortunate to have this series of uninterrupted data. This is 22 hours of frames front to back, where I just took one on the hour and lined them up. I would say that looks a fair bit different than what NASA put out. That what we saw was almost completely parallel action, sunspot to sunspot. But they all seemed to be going in the same direction. This is their data, boys, and that's not what I'm seeing. I don't know about you.
Does that suggest? Okay. Does that suggest those sunspots are moving independently?
Yeah, they're moving in all kinds of different directions. Like the thing isn't spinning. Like, you know what I mean? They're not stationary. They're moving regardless of what the actual sun is doing. The sun is not doing anything. The sunspots are moving, but the sun's, movement itself is not the thing as a whole that's influencing that. As you can tell by the fact that they're all going in different directions like that.
I am so curious for a rebuttal on that.
Oh,
Because you'd
can't
expect them
wait.
to all be parallel to each other, horizontal lines across, essentially.
If we're to believe what NASA's publishing 2 years ago, yeah, that's exactly what they want us to think. But now we've got hard data coming from a civilian who claims to be a Globie, and at the same time, ironically, claiming a victory for the Globies based on the data they claim to be getting. This is the irony for me is just so thick you can cut it with a knife.
He's getting close to saying goofery, I can hear it.
What was that, G?
I said, he's getting close to saying goofery, I can hear it.
Oh, Sartanian levels. Yes, totally go for here.
Stone G, can you hear me?
I certainly can, Lily. What's up there?
Hey, I have not been this excited with a video as this one in a long time. Would you please publish it somewhere like on X or something?
I certainly can.
A whole bunch. Huh?
Absolutely. In fact, Flat Earth Fridays is tonight. I want to put it up there just between now and then. And by all means, exploit it and plug it and forward it and taunt it and slap the Globies in the face with it all you like.
Yeah, no, the reason I'm so excited is that, in Vedic cosmology, they're called grahas. So the sun, moon, and the planets are called grahas. And graha means to hold or to grasp or to grab, to grab hold of. And so, what in the inanimate world does grabbing and holding? It's magnets. And I think that those sunspots may be, like your wires, your wires go to two spots, right? That might be like the spots where these wires, which we can't see, because they may be like out of our, range of vision on the light spectrum, and so there's some kind of magnetic or electromagnetic energy that is the plug-in point perhaps or something, and so that's what we're seeing, and they're all like moving around because everything's moving, it's all related, the sky is moving, And so it must be somehow magnetically connected to something out there, the sun. And because I'm convinced that these planets and the luminaries are all like there's magnetism heavily involved in their existence and their operation.
I would concur. And when I look up like that and think along those lines, the first thing that always occurs to me in terms of the mechanism is that what we're looking up there in terms of technological level is far above what we puny humans are capable of, much less conceiving of. So yes, and guys like Eric Dollard, for example, have been referring to the sun for years as a converter of energy. Now, it never says anything about where the energy comes from or how it's being converted, because we cannot know that from down here on the surface. We can't get up there with our microscopes and our magnifying glasses and actually look at what's going on up there. Someday that may happen, some fine day. But until then, this is all the data we got. And so far, it's looking pretty good for us.
Yeah. I want to totally dissect this video and watch it over and over again. Thank you so much. All this work on magnets is fascinating. I'm fascinated with magnets.
So glad. So very glad. What kind of information are you talking about? I actually haven't followed his work that closely that recently. So I don't know what his current stance is on that. And he paywalls a lot of his stuff. So I cannot hear everything he says. You know what I mean? I'm cheap. I spend my money on circuitry, But no, it would be neat to see. Yeah, well, it would be good to review it, I suppose. My pleasure. Any other questions, comments from the rest of the gang?
Just a big thank you in case I didn't thank you earlier. This is fantastic.
I'm just
You are the...
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean it.
What's that, G?
I was gonna say I'm kind of in shock. I don't really understand this. I haven't looked at a time lapse of sunspots, and I didn't expect that result. So I'm kind of sitting here slack-jaw about this one.
Okay, let me break it down for you in the most base terms. That when we looked at the first slide that the Turkish astrophotographer was exploiting in terms of the series of images that NASA put out on their own site once per day in the month of December 2022, I think is when that happened. Roughly 25 days long worth of exposures of the sun. And what the Turkish guy did was he took them all and produced the composite, which is the one that you see in the beginning of this video. That is the whole 25 days all in one shot. Like sunspots are appearing and then disappearing during that time, not just going straight across the whole time. You know what I mean? They don't all appear at the side of the sun and then move across it. They appear midfield and begin to move across it in independent directions, which we see in the McKeegan exposures. Now, McKeegan, I said there were 22 hours. I showed 20 because he botched a few right at the beginning. So I knocked 2 hours off the beginning of everything that he took, because just for sake of stability of the image and continuity of what we're tracking here, being, what was that, 2, 4, 6, maybe 8 sunspots at the time that were going across in various positions, only in those 20 hours. And frankly, I think they're going pretty fast compared to what NASA was showing for 25 days worth of progress for some of those sunspots. All going in the same direction, allegedly. I mean, hey, maybe it was chance. Maybe the Globies are going to come up with that as an excuse or a reason or whatever they're going to think that it is. But the data does not suggest that NASA is being straight with us.
Yeah, I can't explain why the sunspots would do that if it is a sphere, rotating, and what I don't know what sunspots are anymore, I guess, or what they were.
It's where we have to be physically in order to see them move straight across the sun. That we have to be not only on the ecliptic with all the other planets, that's not relevant to the observation. What is during those 25 days somehow, the sun was on the ecliptic of the sun's motion itself, alleged rotational motion in place, in the same way that the Earth has an equator and the moon goes X degrees north and X degrees south of the equator over time in terms of its GP above Earth. Earth has a GP above the sun, and that's supposed to be going along the sun's quote unquote equator or equatorial point of movement in its rotation, alleged rotation. And that is what NASA was trying to assert by showing that 25-day long sequence of sunspots, is somehow that's must have been where we are. And no, when we're looking at actual civilian collected data for 20 hours, it's not showing that at all.
Well, I hope they do more sunspot time lapses like they did, because currently those two time lapses aren't compatible. Theirs was like an overlay, right, where they take all the spots and place them onto one
Yeah,
image.
composite. It was a composite. Yeah.
I hope they do more composite, because I don't understand the sun right now.
See, that's the thing. NASA didn't put out that composite. The Turkish guy did. NASA just put out the frame by frame, day by day, and he took them all and produced his own. And in early January 2023, that's when he posted his composite shot to Instagram.
I see.
Stone, I wanted to ask you about that Marinov motor.
Yeah, shoot.
How your expectations prior to doing that experiment compared to the results, how far away were those?
Unfortunately, not very far away. And that's what I mentioned in the middle of, I think, the third video that I showed you tonight in that series, where I state that I mentioned back when we were reviewing the paper itself. If you go back, if you head off to Alan's Space Audits YouTube channel, you can get back to the first week of October, where I spend about 30 minutes after we read the paper reviewing the paper and my thoughts on what we just read, and the half a dozen different points that struck me as weird or worthy of comment of some kind. And one of them, of course, was the units of measurement being dyne centimeters.
I remember that.
Right?
He's changing it, right?
Yeah, he's gone from foot-pound to dyne centimeter. And that's where we come up with 1 dyne centimeter equates to 74 billionths of a foot-pound, to tell you how small that torque force really is. And when we translate that to the practical here, that's exactly what I was seeing at 26 amps. You know what I mean? So many dynes per amp, which is why I decided to rewire it in the first place. Like my first attempt, you saw in the first video of that series, where the entire wiring is set up series, full-on series, that one tiny filament out of 7 of the 10 wires going through it at a time per pass, so that it literally equates to 70 turns of stator wiring going past the magnets, trying to make them go. It means that I can use my puny little cheap Chinese piece of crap power supply to put out 23 volts, but because there's 16, 17 ohms worth of resistance in the total series, only an amp and a third pumps through it, even when it's warm. So rewiring it, we're cutting the resistance down to 0.3 or 0.4 ohms through the entire wiring set, so that we can hit it with only 10 volts, but 26 amps goes through it. And then we start to relate more directly and in a more applied way to his quotation about dyne centimeters per amp. And what I obtained there definitely agreed with what Phipps was asserting, even though he was also asserting that somehow this is a useful technology for electromechanical power, which it isn't.
Yeah, it was intrigued by the way that the magnet is in the middle of the motor, or the magnet itself is what's spinning and the coils are stationary. It reminded me, I follow another guy where he calls it a Newman motor, but he essentially takes a steam-driven
Hey,
Tesla
levelist.
turbine.
Levelist.
Yeah,
Can you plug your mic?
Yeah.
You unplug your
I
mic
was
and plug
hoping
it
it
back in?
Give me
wasn't
one
just
second.
me.
give me 10 seconds.
Yeah, I was hoping that wasn't just me. I'm not staticky like that, am I, guys?
Now you're solid.
Better?
Okay, good.
He takes a steam-driven Tesla turbine. It's like about an 8-inch Tesla turbine, and it's running
Yeah,
at
like
like
50,000
17
RPM. Yeah.
like 20,000 to 30,000 RPM, and he has a fairly small magnet on the axle of that of
On
the
the
Tesla
shaft.
turbine. Yeah, and then he has like a series of coils on the outside. He referred to them as like a Newman style generator, and he is showing some fairly good results. It's behind a paywall. It's on I forget the name of that site.
I am fairly skeptic of that assertion. Newman was all about very high voltage, very low current.
Yeah.
And I suppose that part of the electromechanics agrees, because the faster you're moving the magnets, 20,000 RPM, the more the voltage is the influence in the magnetoelectric effect that you're pulling out of it. So that's kind of nice. But I don't personally agree with these guys who take one type of force, convert it into another, and then convert it into another, because every time you do a conversion of one force into the next, typically you have losses, you have inefficiencies, you know what I mean? You want to minimize that effect, and the last thing that you want to do is do it again on the same machine and somehow create something useful for society. That's where I have a philosophical disagreement with people who do stuff like that. And then they make really weird claims like you just said about how it's Newman. And no. Newman had some pretty elaborate stator wiring behind what he was doing that most people don't really have the wherewithal to replicate correctly, accurately.
I agree. I'm focusing on thermal now. I would rather just get a big ass parabolic dish, concentrate that sun, heat up something that is very well insulated to a very high temperature, like 1,000-gallon water tank. And I would rather figure out how to pull energy off of 1,000 gallons of water at 200 degrees, derive my energy from that. In my opinion,
That's one way to do it. Sure, it's free. Why wouldn't you?
it's very exact. Well, like the best efficiencies we're getting from, let's say, a solar panel is in the 22%, where all you have to do to double that efficiency is instead of extracting the electricity from the sun through photovoltaics, you just extract the heat from the sun, and you're in the 40% efficiency range already.
Well, again, it doesn't matter what the efficiency is if your input is free. You just make more of them until you have as much as you need. In terms of per unit mechanism. But based on what you just described to me so far, I would suggest that you check out the Peltier world, Peltier. That is a double-sided wafe of doped silicon and some other cool things, cobalt, whatever else is in there, where you can apply voltage to the thing. One side of it will get hot, the other side will get cold. But you can make a similar version of that Peltier mechanism where you apply hot to one side and heat sink the other side, and DC comes out. Definitely recommend you check that out. There's a guy in Quebec who makes a fairly affordable version of about 1.5 inches square by about almost 3/16 of an inch thick per wafer, and they put out 12 volts, that kind of thing. So you just get a schwack of them and hit them with radiation, and you're getting DC out. You might want to check that out. Peltier.
Yeah, it's like a solid state thermoelectric. Yeah,
precisely.
yeah. So if you were to uh, have 1,000 gallons of hot water, and you just slap one of those Peltier devices on the side of that tank, and it runs your light over here, and it runs your pump over here, and your fan over there. You could derive quite a bit of useful energy from that, I would think.
Yeah, I suppose if you've got your sun heating all of the water during the day, that being your heat mass, and then you constantly cycle the water past the Peltiers and heat sink them to the cold side on the outside, then yeah, that's a constant form of DC. You bet.
Yeah, it would be basically from what I've read, it's much easier to retain the heat you've already have, meaning capture, insulating something that's already hot, rather than taking something that is room temperature and trying to heat it up every single day. So, the sun would be out and you'd be heating up your water tank, and then you're just trying to keep it warm at nighttime for that 12 hours.
Yeah, pretty much. You could technically just open a door on it when the sun is out, and then close the door, the insulating door on it for when the sun's not out, and yeah, you've got all your heat right there. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, the
That's
sand,
almost the
you
same
can,
as just plain old heating the ground. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, the water you run into pressure when you get it up above, boiling point. Your pressures, you have to pressurize it differently. Where the sand, you can get to almost 1,000 degrees Celsius before sand itself will start turning into silica or melting. So
Oh, for sure. Like, was it in Dubai where the guy hooked up that massive tower, the salt pillar, so to speak, with a whole bunch of parabolic reflectors all the way around it? Did you guys see that one? A gigantic field. They look like solar, like photovoltaics all set up on stands, but they're actually reflectors, and they all take the sun and reflect it to the top of this tower, where they're circulating salt, and they get it hot enough that they can circulate it as a fluid. And then they bring that down and run a heat exchange on it and produce power from that. It's ingenious.
so my next question, Stone, is what is your next device? What are you going to tinker on next?
What am I doing next? I
Are
can think
and
about
are you
that for a
taking
sec. Give me.
suggestions?
Oh, always, always. I may have already done what you suggest. You never know. But no, in the lab right now.
What are you cooking up,
No,
dude?
I think my bench is actually pretty clear right now. It's been about the digital data for me, since the end of or the middle of December, right? I've been waiting for more data, more data. You know what I mean? We're finally uploading high-res versions of the 24-hour, 25 and a half hour sequences that Duffy and Witsit took with their 360 cam. So those are going through Galatrax right now. He's seeding out to the first couple people. So if you have a torrent client on your desktop, like a BitTorrent or something like that, we can just feed you a link, and then you can pull down those 19 gigabyte files for the three-parter that I put up there, and the 34 gig time-lapse file that Sam created for us. It's about 73 minutes long and shows the same footage, just sped up. It's for the people with shorter attention spans, I guess, or don't really want to see the real time action. But yeah, those are going up, and now we're all done with McKeegan. I'm waiting to see some more stuff from Witsit, hopefully this week. He's got a bunch of IR stuff and imaging stuff that he claims he's moving down the road. So yeah, I can't wait to see the rest. But as far as my bench goes, no, right now I think my bench is pretty clear as far as what I'm building in terms of science. Yeah, shoot. Right. So many questions that we just cannot answer while we are only down here on the surface of the Earth. Again, back to Eric Dollard, he referred to it as a converter. It is obviously a focal point of some kind, taking some kind of energy source. And for that matter, it could be a trillion hamsters all running on wheels. You know, we don't know what that could be that is giving the sun so much energy that it can put out such a broad spectrum of heat and light at us nonstop for thousands of years, or however long you think it's been going on, without a stutter. And on that note, when it comes to the sunspots themselves, I see a kind of coming together of like the connecting of the dots in my own mind from other things that I've heard over so many years of talking about the sun, the galaxy, the this, the that, the space, the thing, when we look at it and we look at things like light bulbs in our own lives, the standard incandescent light bulb, which is nothing more than a heated filament giving off excessive blackbody radiation because of all of the electrons blowing through it, a resistive conduit, which is, translating that to heat for us. Guys like Archaics have been talking about how there's going to be something else coming along and it's cyclic. Maybe that is the changing of the sun. Maybe that is that we are seeing more sunspots more frequently because the thing's wearing out. And there just may come a time in our near future, and I don't even know what near is for us. Is that the next century, the next month? I don't know. But in our near future, where something up there is going to swap out the light bulb, and that might take a couple of days. And that could have some really bad ramifications for everybody down here on the surface. Just more thoughts that are in my head about what could be based on so many other data points in our history that all point to it. Yeah, it might mean 2 weeks of snow for everybody. You know what I mean? Over in the Sahara, you might be getting snow for a week and forget about using your solar oven. Because that ain't gonna happen. You know what I mean? Anything that's running on it, you're screwed unless you have some batteries to the side.
And
Could be.
solar panels too.
Yeah, your solar panels too, man. Your heat masses, all that stuff is useless without the sun. And I agree that even slight variations in what happens with the sun, things that we perceive as seasons, the difference in your local weather between June and December is striking. And all that's happening there is a slight shift to the path of the sun, celestially speaking, to have that profound effect cyclically on the climate of Earth in general. Could be far more devastating than we imagine, just swapping it out for a couple days.
So you're telling me to hang on to my diesel generator?
For now, you might want to get a really big fuel tank for it too. But, that could just be alarmist fear porn. It might not happen for 100 years or 500. But if we continue to see increase in the frequency and severity of sunspots, I'm thinking, hey, that could just be the sun breaking down over time. Nothing lasts forever, right? Why would the sun be any different? Even in the Globey model, they talk about things going nova, turning into white dwarfs, exceeding the Chandrasekhar limits for anybody who studied that stuff in astrophysics, where, gravity's going to rule and it's going to collapse in on itself and all these bad things are going to happen. Well, maybe not those things, but something might happen. We cannot know.
Wasn't it the Farmer's Almanac people that first gave fairly big prominence to those sunspots and actually started making predictions based on them?
I don't know. Could be. I haven't read too many of those.
I'm pretty sure it was them, but I could be wrong.
Entirely possible. Right on, guys. Well, that wraps up part 2, I think. And thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for everybody showing up there out in the network world, the YouTube world, everybody who's going to catch this downstream, even off of my own channel later on when I put her back up there. Yeah, thanks again, guys. It's been a slice.
Much appreciated. Big shout out to Stone for putting together the Marinov and the Sunspot stuff. Big shout out to Sam for removing Jiggly Mountain. Peace be upon him.
Thank you, Stonegi. That was great.
Oh, Lily, did you say you wanted to do a coffee ad?
Oh yeah, my latest testimonial. Yeah, quick story. About Brushtail Coffee, of course. I had a lunch party the other day, and there was 9 of us together, and there was this very sweet Buddhist nun, a monk, like a female monk, a nun, and she came over. Anyways, I served them all some Brushtail coffee after lunch, and she enjoyed it so much, and she wanted to look at the package. So we went to the kitchen, and she saw the heap of dishes, from the lunch. And so we had our cups of coffee in our hands, and she said, "Here, let me chant this mantra, and then we're going to clink our cups of coffee, Brushtail coffee, of course." And then magically, all the dishes were clean and dried and put away like in 2 seconds. So, wow, that is the latest from Brushtail Coffee.
Well, thank you for fulfilling your contractual obligation, Lily. Much appreciated. With that said, we're going to close out here and stay tuned for Flat Earth Fridays, which will be starting